Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 6, Episode 3 of Lucifer. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, you have Lucifer trying to, going to, Linda for advice because it's like, oh, like your last bit of advice was terrible, so he didn't get the answers he was necessarily looking for, so he ultimately decides to try and get advice from her, which we see like Linda working on. So she's like, oh, I'm just journaling and stuff like that, and we see like she's basically doing like a book about her experiences with Lucifer and stuff like that. I'm like, you wouldn't have to hide that. Like if you were tell Lucifer you were doing that, I think he'd be like, oh really, make sure you only tell about the good stuff. But it's because she's going to be telling it from a therapist standpoint. All the stuff in there Lucifer wouldn't sign off of. But it's just like, I mean Lucifer's borderline narcissistic enough to like be like all about it. Like, oh, you want to dedicate an entire book to me all about me? Sure, I can do that. Like I said, he just won't always be okay with the content of it, but maybe that's why she is not telling him about it. But I thought that was kind of a little, it's like, tell me about your first case. It's like, yeah. And she's like, oh, tell me the guy's name. Like, what was he, like, she was trying to get all these details. I was like, that's kind of nasty that you're trying to like get some details out of him like this for the book that you're kind of writing about related to him. So it's like, it is kind of messed up in the end. So I guess this is her way of kind of doing something a little bit more, because once again, I brought it up the past two episodes. It's like, you can't really showcase your story, because I'm sure she's going to have to shift all the she's going to have to turn everything into a metaphor. Basically for this book, she's going to have to go back to season 1, Linda, early season 1 Linda, who hadn't, was it, she found out in season 1, or was it season 2 she ended up finding out about Lucifer? I can't remember. I want to say it was season 1, she saw his devil face. I think, if I remember, it's been a while. But regardless, like, she's going to have to go back to the ignorant, like, Linda in the regards of, like, oh, she's ignorant to, like, the celestial stuff being real. She thinks that this is just his personification of how he manifests things, and in actuality ended up being the devil, and everything he was saying was actual legit. So she'd have to probably, like, rework the story to be like, oh, like, he goes by Lucifer, that, oh, like, he's using this whole thing as a metaphor of dealing with his stuff. So, like, that's her way of dealing with it. Because, like, there's no way you can publish that, because you will be ridiculed and, like, you'll lose your job, despite how real and truthful it is. So I'm curious, like, what is her approach to the book and everything. So there's that element to it. There's Ella with the frog thing. She doesn't want to tell anybody about it, because she's like, right, if I tell you the truth, because she's like, how far can a frog fall before it dies? It's like, oh, you want to test it out? You can use the penthouse. She's like, no, I'm not doing that, Lucifer. And it's like, she's like, I'll tell you about it at some other time, but just like, I don't want to tell you right now, because I'm going to sound like crazy. Which is, unless you want me to. He's like, no, I respect your privacy. It's like, you probably need to know that information right now, because that coincides with just like everything that's potentially going wrong. So things in the universe not being copacetic and stuff like that. So he goes to her looking into Jimmy Barnes, the first case that he ever started. When he met Chloe, it's actually how he met Linda as well. So like, that was kind of the beginning of the series, was that particular case where his friend was murdered by Jimmy. So it turns out Jimmy was in a asylum because he went crazy seeing Lucifer's devil face. Well, it turns out he died. So, I love that, like, right, Lucifer's about to take his trip to hell, and Chloe was actually coming in there to return to Menadil's pendant, because like, she started realizing, like, right, I am kind of like getting a little crazy about this. But the moment Lucifer's like, I'm going to go to hell, and Chloe's all about it. And I thought it was so interesting. It's like, the moment she's like, with this, I'll be strong enough, right? And he tries to take it from her. She's like, no. It's like, once again, she went full Gollum in that moment. It's like, no, I'll need it just right. It's like, she's making excuses. She was about willing to give it up, and now it's like, oh, I found another reason to hold on to it. I don't have to let go of it. Cool, I'm gonna keep it, and it's gonna keep me strong. And it's almost like she's looking for a thrill. Like I said, it's like, it's playing into like getting rid of like all like, oh, like my job, like I had to leave behind what I was really good at. Like, it's almost, like I said, it's like, with this thing, she's overcompensating. Like, she's looking for a new thrill in life, like fighting Mace to get the blood pumping. And it's just like, once again, whether this has to deal with all the other stuff she's dealing with on top of it, like her worries about being like, consultant to God, as well as just, leaving her job behind that she's really good at, just what the future holds for her and Lucifer in general. But it's like, this is something where she kind of feels like, oh, like she's getting a rush of like, oh, I get to go to hell, which even Lucifer's like, I'm not too keen on that idea because it's never really been done transporting like, you have to be dead to do that whole thing, but it's like taking a living human to hell. It's like, that doesn't really work. I mean, it could be dangerous, but the pendant can protect her. But I love that Lucifer was like, yeah, this is like the craziest, worst idea I've heard since they canceled Bones. I was like, shut up. Paying respect to another Fox-related show, and I love that. And it's like, she's like, why? He's like, I don't know. It was a good balance of procedural. She's like, no, why can't I go to hell? And he's like, okay, never mind. But I love that he referenced that. Once again, just another like Fox, a fellow Fox show. I just think that's so interesting. I love the little references like that. Bones is a show I need to go back to because I did like watch a lot of Bones, but then like I fell super far behind. There was a particular case that was very important to Bones. I don't want to say what it is because it might be spoilers for later stuff, but like, I want to say maybe season 9 might have been the last season I was caught up on. There was like a couple more seasons. Like, I know there was like a major character death because like I don't want to say just to spoil, but I know like an actor. There's at least one actor I can think of that left the show because he wanted to have other opportunities. He couldn't do much while he was like filming like Bones. I remember that at the time. I won't spoil it, but it's kind of sad knowing said character. I was like, oh, I don't, that's really depressing. But regardless, it's a show I need to circle back to at some point in time. But it just, I'm glad that Lucifer brought that up. They kind of put that back in my forefront of my mind. But it's like, right, it's like, they are partners, so like Chloe can help him. He's like, all right, so they go to hell, and he spreads his wings, and she's like, I'm never gonna get tired of that. And just as they're leaving, our blooded winged angel shows up with Dan, and Dan's like, Lucifer, run! There's a crazy meanie angel trying to kill you. And we're like, oh, look at you, Dan. He's like, haha, I tricked you. But he doesn't have a body here. He's a ghost because he's a soul without a body. Because it's like, I figured as much because like demons have to be put into a recently deceased body just to be here on Earth. So like, of course, like the same thing would apply. But I think he's just gonna be running amok for like most of the season as a ghost. Only like celestial beings, like, so like probably Maze can see him. I'm sure Amenadiel and obviously Lucifer can, but it's like only celestials or like beings of that nature could potentially see Dan. So I think that's what I think he's gonna be like in ghost form for most of the season, and I think there's gonna be hijinks, but I think there's gonna be a lot of heart behind that too, because once again, I'm sure those Trixie scenes are going to break my heart. I know they are because no one else would be able to see him, not Chloe, not Trixie, so not even Linda, so there's elements to that. But regardless, I love that they roll up just in time, and it's like, cool. She's like, I guess I didn't tell you about that whole angle to it. And I obviously, like, he's trying to open up to her, like, I get it, like, you want to hate, like, he's like, hey, I tried to kill Lucifer too, but it's like, right, I came to realize he's not that bad of a guy. Even at first being like, what can you do against Lucifer? I mean, he is the devil. I mean, he's like probably one of the most powerful beings in existence. And she shows her wings. He's like, yeah, Lucifer's got wings too. Like, what are you going to do? And then she uses her wings to slash to a statue. She's like, all right, that's different. I also love that he's not, because Dan died before, like, everything was concluded, because he hasn't officially become God yet, but, like, Dan knows he was working towards it. He doesn't know, like, he's at the finish line. All he has to do is just sit on the throne and accept it. But, yeah, he is practically God, so it's like, that's going to be a whole conversation. But, like, Dan doesn't know that yet, so, like, of course he wouldn't be able to tell that to her to scare her off. But she's all just adamant about going after Lucifer. And but he's, Dan, considering everything that he's been through, it's like, right, when you try to hurt somebody like that, like, all you do in the end is hurt yourself. So, like, if you want to talk about it, like, considering everything that Dan's went through, like, all the journey that he's had, of course he would have this perspective. And I'm glad that Dan was, like, not being a douchebag. I was like, come on, like, everything you've been through, it's like, yeah, that's my boy Dan. I knew I loved you, Dan. I was scared for a second that you were going to betray us, but it's like, no, I say that betray us. It's in, like, betray the fan base of, like, turning against Lucifer again, but it's like, no, we're good. Woo, you're still the awesome Dan we love, so it's like, that was just interesting. So there's that element to it. But obviously in hell, like, hell is a little wonky, and I'm curious, is it because someone else sat on the throne, and I'm sure, like, because we haven't really had anyone else sit on the throne of hell for Lucifer, so we don't know what it is like for someone else to sit. Like, if Maze sat on the throne, would hell have shifted like, is everything moving around because someone else sat on a throne, and like, is hell kind of a reflection of whoever's sitting on the throne? So like, the current state of hell like reflected Lucifer, but things are a little mismatched because an interloper kind of got sat on the throne. Granted, when we get to it later on, she has like just as much right to the throne in certain regards, but we'll get it to. But it's like the whole point, like the initial rule is it has to be an angel on the throne anyway. But maybe her circumstances are a little wonky that it threw everything into chaos, or maybe that was just kind of her middle finger to Lucifer to like shake things up. There was one particular door that Chloe's about to open. He's like, yeah, don't do that. Like, last thing you want to do is go in someone else's hell. You get stuck in a hell loop. He's like, trust me, I was stuck in one, stabbing my brother over and over. It's like, all right, Uriel, right? I was like, right, I completely forgot about that for a second. That seemed like a very specific door, so I'm like, that's got to have some significance. The fact is he stopped you from opening it. Maybe it's going to end up. I turned the porch. Maybe it's not really of significance to Lucifer. Maybe it's not something he's trying to pull Chloe away from. But the fact is that she was drawn to it makes me think like there's something to that. Like, I don't know. We'll see. But they end up finding Jimmy's door, and lo and behold, they go inside of it, and it's animation time. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of bummed it wasn't the entire episode, but I'm like, anytime I could get some animation, like, I talked about it recently, like, Supernatural's, like, Scooby-Doo episode, probably one of my favorite episodes of Supernatural, because it was just so wild and great, and, like, most of the episodes animated. Also, like, most recently, Legends of Tomorrow, so, like, I had brought it up recently, the fact is that, like, you know, like, oh, like, a lot of live action stuff is getting mixed in with the animated stuff. Also, you have like Space Jam, A New Legacy. So it's just interesting. Like a lot of stuff under the Warner Brothers banner kind of like got that treatment. I thought was fascinating. But I loved it. She's like, oh, look at your chin. And he's like, oh, it's very. She's like, butt like. He's like, no, I was gonna say awesome as it is in real life. What do you mean it's butt like? And just like the craziness of like the wackiness of like the world and everything. She's like, oh, is this a Minidell's pendant making it that I can do this? Or is it because I'm a cartoon? Who cares? You know, so they're really like, and I love that they go to, they track down Jimmy's wedding, and it's like, oh, I'm interrupted again. And lo and behold, the devil with them cakes comes through. And it's just like, wait, is that supposed to be me? And then Lucifer's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm done with this. And he's about to leave, but Chloe's like, right, like you wanted to do this, so you got to see this through. And, you know, he's like, right, you're right. But also things are different because the door's going now. It's like, that's not supposed to happen. And Lucifer doesn't have the control over hell like he normally does. Like things have gotten wonky. Once again, angels are self-actualizing, but maybe because of the like they never really went over it, but maybe it's like maybe because of hell's a little wonky right now, or it could just be because he is like so like caught up in this thing of like, right, he needs answers that like subconsciously he locked himself in there so that him and Chloe could get the answers he was looking for, because the whole point is to care about this. If he can help someone that he hates, then that means that could give him the answer for potentially like how he can go about caring about other people even though he doesn't. Like that's, you know, still continuing down that arc of this. But I love like the fourth wall breaking of like, right, it's a cartoon and stuff like that. So for him it's like the fourth, like the like it's like cartoon logic. He tries to leave and it's just like there's actual like invisible walls, and he couldn't, even with his wings, couldn't bust out. And I love like Chloe just sits back and she looks at down there. She's like, huh, because like Lucifer talked about the fact it's like, oh, I'm smooth down there, which I'm like, there's another comic book related character that's pretty smooth down there, and it's not the same circumstances. But nevertheless, he's looking, and Chloe's like, it'll be fine, like when we leave her, right? He's like, right, I guess so. But even she was looking like, oh wow, there's like nothing down there. So I love that she's just kind of getting enraptured by all of this and just kind of the fun of it all. But I love when they actually do go back to the wedding, and like Lucifer, like the devil's like saying all this stuff. It's like Chloe's like, did you actually say that? He's like, some form of that. And then something else. He's like, I did not say that. It's like, okay, that kind of is a little paraphrasing of what I said, but let's interrupt this. And then Chloe goes, dukes it out with the devil, beats him up and everything, and she's having so much fun. I love him being like, yeah, in the nuts. And he's drinking, and he's just spitting. It's like, apple juice. Oh, can he have whiskey? And it starts censoring him, and like more censor stickers like pop on layer on top of each other. It's so good. I love it. Cartoon shenanigans. I love it. you can't help but feel a little bit bad for that devil who got beat up, because you know that that was just some demon manifesting itself like that. I'm just assuming, like, even though it's cartoon rules, because it was like, oh, hey, and walked by Lucifer and said, hey, he was like, oh, hey. So it's like, yeah, it's just a demon in disguise. Like, but obviously that's not how the whole hell loop situation works anyway. But obviously, like, this is just scratching the surface, because even Lucifer being like, yeah, like, these hell loops manifest in a different way anyway, but then on top of it, to look the way it does now, it's still kind of weird. Like, your hell is a cartoon. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. But then, like, you know, Lucifer manifesting his devil face, which it looks kind of crazy to see that animated, which I also love, like, when they were walking past Jimmy's version of Lucifer, he sees, like, the chest hair. He's like, oh, like, yeah, puff of chest hair. Like, you know, do you like that? Because if you will, I can't. And Chloe's, no thanks, I'm good. But nevertheless, they go deeper and they leave the cartoon, and they end up in, like, a very 80s area, and they run into Jimmy, which I love. Lucifer's like, nah, 30 years ago or not, I can recognize that five-heading where I'm like, stop being so mean. It's like, well, he's a terrible person, so who cares, right? But then they go deeper and they see, like, oh, him being the producer for a particular band, but that band was kind of a one-hit wonder, but it's like that band fired him, so I was like, oh, like, he kind of got, like, his comeuppance to them, because but it's like, no, I thought it was like, oh, they fired you because, like, he wanted to make songs that were too mainstream, and like, oh, we want to make real music, you know? So I thought that kind of, but like when the lead person was talking to him, he shifted into a woman that's got like a guitar in her back. I was like, no, what the hell was that? Because I thought that was in the trailer, I thought that was something in the real world happening. I didn't realize that was something in hell happening at that time. So I thought that's interesting to kind of know the context of that finally. But it turns out that's kind of scratching the surface too, because like that's where things kind of took an even bigger leap for Jimmy, where he started kind of going down that route, because he used to be kind of I think a decent enough person, but we see like the moment he got a chance, he screwed over that band. Was it Wednesday's Child? Which I mean, it was kind of thinking like, oh, is it like a weekend nod to like a Destiny's Child type of thing? That's why I was wondering, but it's, you know, but obviously not the whole one-hit wonder thing, but just like the naming convention or whatever. But he like called up a whole bunch of people and was like, yeah, you might not want to work with that band. They stole a lot of their riffs and stuff like that. Like, screw them over. That's why they became the one-hit wonders. But then, like, I think the person, like, I don't know if that was his significant other or rather like just someone that was like he was producing for. She was like, you should call them back and like undo that. I know what kind of person you are. And he was like, you're right. I'm better than you. I don't need you. Get out. You know? And then it happens again, and it's like, and then Lucifer like uses his powers, like, what is it you desire? He's like, I don't want her to go. And Lucifer's like, well, then don't let her go. And he chases it, like tells him to chase after her. The door pops open, but Lucifer's like, no, I want to see this through. And so we find out like the true nature of the moment like we saw the woman again. I was like, he wasn't talking about the girl that walked away this time. He was talking about the woman with the guitar. I was like, that's got to be his mom. It's like, that's where his abandonment issues stem from. Like, you know, because for him, he had said this at the time to Lucifer. It's like, people like, because it's like, right, like, you're scared that people are just going to like abandon you. He's like, you don't understand. He's like, people just like want me for this and this. It's like, yeah, or is that just all that you ever offered to people? But obviously we learn like at a young age, his mom left him because like some like wrote like whoever it was convinced him like, right, your son's just going to hold you back. And because of that, she ended up leaving her son in a hotel, but like, oh, I'm gonna be right back. Part of me was wondering like where she is right now. Like, did it go like Lilith's situation? Like, there's a parallel there because like Lilith abandoned her children for a mortal life, but things apparently didn't work out. Like, we didn't get much of Lilith's life. We got the tail end of it, so we have no idea what those decades were like. All she chalked it up to was like it didn't work out. So who knows? Like, I don't know which one I would prefer. Like, if she wasn't, it's just a thing of like, it's sad, like, because even Lucifer's like, when Child Protective Service came in and they were just grabbing him up, he's like, no, leave me alone, I can't leave, because if I leave, my mom won't know where I am. I was like, oh, that's heartbreaking. Like, to understand, like, it doesn't justify what Jimmy did and grew up and became. Like, you know, your trauma doesn't give you an excuse to be what he became. He killed someone, he's a terrible person, what he's done, but it at least makes Lucifer go, I understand you. And I think it was the main thing was teaching Lucifer empathy on a large, like sympathy in a larger scale, like, you know, trying to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, because that's the thing of like, everyone has their story, because like no one's like, I mean, you can make some arguments, and that's a nature versus nurture conversation about like, are people born evil? I like to believe people are born like right in the middle, like you have the potential for good and evil inside you, but you're net zero, like you're right in the middle, you're neutral, and that your experiences in life, maybe there is some like genetic thing there that contributes to it, but also it is your environment that makes you who you are, and his circumstances led him to become the person he was. So like, again, once again, it's like, I'm not forgiving you for what you've done, but I'm at least understanding why you became who you became, like, you know, what life kind of threw your way, you know. And so it's like, I can't even make sure I can't even guarantee I can get you out of hell, because at the end of the day, that has to be on you. You know, maybe you don't even deserve to leave hell, but still, I'm going to do what I can. And he ends up rewinding everything and making his mom sit back down. It's like, for now, this is all I can do. And in that moment, Jimmy kind of leans against his mom, because like Chloe had brought it up, like, right, why his hell initially was in the form of a cartoon, because those cartoons were his comfort for when he was sad. So that's why it was like that's why it manifested itself like that, because the cartoons, I'm sure, were kind of like a, escapism for, that sadness. Because like, it's like, how long was he sitting there waiting for his mom before, like, Child Protective Services came up? Like, I mean, did he ever find his mom again? Maybe not, considering everything, considering the trauma, like the mental, like he probably just never was able to track her down. Maybe by the time it was already too late. Maybe she was already gone, We don't get that scale of everything, but I think that's such an interesting thing, because I was curious, like, maybe that could be the way Lucifer, like, changes how hell's operated, because the whole conversation, he even gave Michael a second chance, like, everyone deserves one, so maybe hell was going to end up becoming an actual rehabilitation, an opportunity for people to move past, what they've done, their guilt and everything, to eventually, like, maybe that's the direction it's going, I don't know. That's just something kind of interesting to kind of keep in the back of on my mind. But at the same time, in this episode, before we kind of get to the end of everything in that regard, we have Amenadel meeting his new training officer, and that being Harris, and it's like, wait, that's just your name? It's like, okay, weird. And she's like, I'm Officer Harris. He's like, oh, and you say my name is weird. He's like, because I know your name's not actually Officer. And he tried to explain it, and Maze is watching. She's like, I want to get as much dirt as I can so that I can like make fun of him. And like the moment like Ella was kind of like, oh man, like she failed so many people. And so like they're in the car, and he's like talking about like, you're probably wondering why I became a cop. She's like, nope. It's like, but it's like, I have a son. I want to make the world a safer place for him, for everyone, I want to catch the bad guys. There was a vandalism thing, and I was like, wait, is this going to be, and it turned out to be Maze. But I love the officer being like, yeah, like I'll never be able to look at grandmas or like old people, like old women the same way again. It's just like, because like, even if I close my eyes, I think I see, I'm like, what the hell did Maze like paint or whatever, like what did she put up that's so disturbing that guy's like, I'll never be the same afterwards? And I love that, like she gets put in the back seat, and I love the whole thing of just kind of like, hey Baldy, hell, you're pretty good, like you look like you're pretty good in the fight. And he's like, okay, this lady, I know her. She's like, no you don't, stranger. And it's like, Maze, and she's like, come on a minute, Dell. It's like, he's like, she's just trying to make me look good for whatever reason, which is weird. I thought that was part of the joke, like, oh, like she's gonna make him look good, and then like, I thought she was gonna try and make him look bad. But it's like, all right, well, she's gonna go to jail. It's like, wait, what? No, we should just let her go. It's like, no, she's a criminal. Once a criminal, always a criminal. And it's like, he's like, I don't believe that. And she's like, well, if you don't believe that, then maybe you should be a cop. And he's like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be, because I will never start believing that. And she's like, I hope so. I'm like, oh, I was like, that's it. All right, Officer Harris, you're pretty dope. And she lets Maze go, and she's like, yeah, this women's place, like, yeah, you could get the help you need. It's like, Maze is just kind of like, this was supposed to be fun, whatever. But then later on, Amenadel confronts her about it, and it's like, why were you doing all that you were doing? She was like, you should be thanking me, because like if I hadn't done what I'd done, you would have never been in that position for her reverse psychology not to work on, that whole thing. But then she admits, like, she wasn't doing it for fun. It's because you're my friend. I was like, that's actually super sweet. Like, Maze is not very good at being very truthful and honest when it comes to her heart. It doesn't come easy to her, Because, like, the only people she's ever really, like, that honest with is, you know, because her, like, adult relationships have always been complicated, whether it's been with Chloe, with Linda, obviously this whole situation with Eve. I mean, obviously things are in a good place, but her and Aminadel, her and Lucifer, her and Dan being kind of complicated, her and Ella being okay. But, like, even her relationship with Trixie has been complicated at points. But, so, like, that's why it's not, like, second nature to her, like, to kind of, like, she's like, I could have handled it in a more thoughtful or whatever way, like, handled it in a better way. But it's like, at the end of the day, he's like, thanks. It's like, you know, just from now on, this is very important to me. She's like, I won't make fun of you. He's like, I don't believe you. She's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't. I'm like, I like them, like, I liked where their relationship is, so that was pretty dope. But going back to Lucifer and Chloe, obviously Chloe, after everything, you know, it was pretty hard, like, that whole situation, because it wasn't the experience Lucifer thought it was going to be. But she's like, I need to see Dan. So they're going, and well, I should also point out, she was like, right, that's your throne? He's like, what is that? He's like, yeah, that's my throne. She's like, oh, that's so lonely. He's like, yeah, it was. It's like, yeah, because you're king of hell, but it's still like, right, you're so apart from anyone else. You stand above others, and, like, because a lot of hell is kind of on autoplay, so it's not like you really do much, I think. So it's just kind of like the solitude of it all, you know, for centuries and then millennia on end, you know, without end. But Lucifer actually brings it up. He's like, right, before, like, you were right. Like, I thought, like, me not caring about Carol, but then starting to care about him was a bad thing. Because in this case, I actually started caring about someone I hated too. But he's like, no, that actually is a good thing. Like, if I can start to care about someone I hate, then that means I can start caring about anybody. So for him, it's like, yeah, I think this solidifies it. Like, I am ready to become God. But in that moment, it's like, oh, Dan's not here. What? Dan, like, runs into him on Earth, and he's like, Lucifer, look out, and she comes charging. She's like, right, I can get revenge for what you've done to me. And Lucifer's like, I literally have no idea who you are. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then she's like, you bastard, you're my father. I'm like, there we go. Okay, so that illegitimate child's like, who's the mama? Like, that's what I'm curious about. Like, or is it kind of a, like, would angels need to? Is this something related? Is this supposed to be like a gift from his dad and mom in some shape or form? I don't know. Then I'm like, because even he had said, like, right, you're not one of my siblings, so, like, who the hell are you? He's like, his daughter. I'm like, I mean, maybe that explains the red wings, because maybe that was something after he became the devil and was no longer Samael and, like, in heaven. Like, maybe he was like Lucifer at that point in time, which he kind of abandoned the name Samael, obviously. But I'm like, maybe it was like something he did in hell. Like, maybe he got with a demon, and that's why. Because, like, why are her wings red? Once again, the thing is, angels are self-actualizing, so I'm wondering, like, how much she knows about a lot of that. Because a lot of that is stuff, like, they've become more aware of, because they never really realized that until they came to Earth. So, like, Lucifer never realized that, Aminadel had never realized that until they got to Earth, so maybe she hasn't realized that as well. But, that's an interesting nugget, and it's going to be interesting. It's like, right, you've got your relationship with Chloe, but also this is going to be a wrinkle of, like, oh, Dan's here as a ghost. Also, my daughter. Wait, you have a child? It's like, I mean, Chloe has a child too, so it's like, it's probably going to turn to a conversation. I'm like, well, you know, you have a child, and I've kind of ignored that. It's like, it's something of that nature, maybe kind of like a joke in that regard, but that's definitely going to be interesting. I mean, because Trixie's like a preteen. He has like a full-blown teen daughter, maybe in her early 20s at most. I don't know. That actress kind of seems familiar. I have to look her up when I get a chance, because I feel like I recognize her from somewhere. I need to make sure I do my due diligence before the next review recording, or at the very least before I watch the next episode. But either way, I'm very excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.